I was born into the hum of machines. Even now, years later, I can hear it. A steady, mechanical lullaby, a rhythm that used to mean safety. There's one sound I'll never forget. I keyed our call sign into the mic, short and bored as I had 1,000 times, and the ocean sang it back in a voice that wasn't mine. It had the cadence of our call sign. It said it with delay and melody, not as an echo, but as an answer. If you think you know sonar, that pings and echoes are numbers on a screen, physics and nothing more, then I'm sorry. The sea has manners. Sometimes it is polite enough to reply. This is what happened. I will tell you everything I remember. It's not all technical jargon. It's not all gore. It is small things, a cadence, a thump, a radio static shaped like a word that stacked and stacked until they made a shape. And once the shape formed, the rules changed. My name is Jonah Cruz. I was a petty officer, sonar technician, assigned to USS Atheny, a fast attack boat doing winter patrols in the North Atlantic and Arctic approach. I was 27 at the time. Call sign, Atheny 24. We ran quiet. We ran clean. We lived by lists, pre-watch checklist, ping procedures, contact classification. If it wasn't on the list, it didn't exist. The sonar room was my world. Green CRTs, oscilloscopes, a crowded rack of hydrophonic arrays. There were 2 of us on a watch, me and Mikhail, a crusty petty officer who smelled of pipe tobacco and old diesel. There was the captain up in the control room, the navigator, and a small crew that moved like a single muscle. Sleep when you could, eat when you had a free hand, keep listening. Rules matter under the sea. We had small handouts, laminated cards with phrases like, "Do not ping at dawn in pack ice," "Do not identify an unknown if it tracks you," little superstitions dressed as SOPs. We joked about them to quiet the fear, but there was one rule that mattered more than the rest. Never answer back with a voice. If you keyed your call sign or spoke, the ocean would pick up your tone, and if something was listening, that something would learn you faster. I knew the rule. I'd memorized it. We all had. None of us intended to break it. We had reasons. Curiosity is strong, and boredom even stronger. We were 3 days into a long, gray patrol. Supplies low, watch rotation grinding, silence pressing on us like a lid. That night, we heard something we had no manual for. It started as a contact, a tiny, odd return on passive hydrophones, nothing on active pings. The spectrum looked wrong, harmonics I couldn't place. I flipped through my classification library, whale songs, shipping hulls, seismic signatures. Nothing matched. I said into the intercom, "Bearing 030. Mikhail leaned in, his face in the glow. He rubbed his eyes and said, "Passive? No engine?" He didn't take his hand off the coffee. "No prop, nothing on thermal. Looks like a layered call." He tapped the scope. On the waterfall, small patterns pulsed, a faint repeating rhythm, almost musical. We tracked it quietly. The contact moved in concert with the currents at first. Then it began to turn with us. That was when the skin on the back of my neck tightened. It wasn't just present, it was aware. I took a routine action, old habit. You speak to confirm the boat on the net. It keeps you human among the wires. I keyed the microphone and said the same bored syllable every watch. "Atheny 24. This is Atheny 24. Sonar, verify." I expected silence. I expected waves and numbers. I did not expect a voice to answer. It returned, faintly through the hydrophones, shaped like our call sign. Not a perfect copy, a warped version, like the sound had been played through a funnel of water and time. A slow cadence, Athen 24, and a trailing vibration that matched the rhythm I used.
I jerked my head up. Mikhail nearly slid off his chair.
The captain's voice came cold through the hatch. "Repeat that? You hearing this?" I repeated into the mic, because once a sound answers you, you want to confirm. The speakers sang back the same syllables, but in a pattern that played on the edges of the frequencies we used for whales. It had harmonic overtones, like harmonica in a storm. We logged it as unknown contact. We classified it as protocol demanded, but there are things classification paperwork fails to capture: the quality of being addressed. The sea had not only reflected us, it had recognized the pattern and returned it. Recognition means learning. Learning means adaptation. Adaptation means risk. We followed procedure. Passive only, no active pings, no chasing. That was the SOP. We kept our heads down. For hours it lurked, responding when we spoke and mimicking our cadence. It answered our call sign with variations. Sometimes it echoed a part of a voice, a single vowel, like it was trying words on for size. By dawn, it did more than sing our name. At first, the responses were play, mimicry, delayed call and copy. Then it started replicating things we hadn't transmitted: our navigational beeps, our watch change rhythms, even faint chuckles from the mess hall. That was a terrible moment. We heard the sound of someone laughing, low and uncertain, and we realized it had recorded and learned a human laugh from us. It wasn't malicious then. It was accumulating a library of references, our voices, our idiosyncrasies, our call sign. We ran tests, small, careful ones, a short chirp here, a metronome beat there. We expected silence, or at least predictable echoes. Instead, it responded with counter rhythms, then harmonized. We played a slow, repeated phrase, a pattern of tones we had used for years as a joke, and it returned them like a chorus. Mikhail murmured, "It's singing harmony." He had that half laugh you get when adrenaline is still higher than fear. The mood changed on board. Morale shrank into focus. Some wanted to break silence and shout into the water. Others wanted to run. The captain called for a sit-down. He was a short, careful man named Brooks. He told us to keep everything documented. He told us to maintain silence and not to raise deep interest to Fleet Command until we had a classification. He scratched the words, "Unknown Intelligent Acoustic Signature," into the log. On night 3, the ocean did something else. It replied with the sound of our own watch change bell before we rang it. Picture that. You carry a small ritual on the sub, a hollow metallic bell tapped at watch change, a comfort note. The ocean played it early, then added a final tone we never used. It had invented a closing note. It was not only copying, it was composing. A petty officer on watch, Nikolai, began to mutter that the ocean knew our schedules. He volunteered for extra rounds and stared into the darkness like a man waiting for a train. He came up with a plan. We throw it a fake, send a nonsense call, something no one would legitimately use. We designed a pattern: 4 clicks, 3 double knocks, and the nonsense syllable kari. We expected silence or maybe a delayed mimicry. Instead, it answered with the pattern and then, after a pause, followed with a different pattern entirely, something like Morse, but offset. It was deliberate. If a listener copies a code, sometimes it's to find what the code means. If it then replies with a different code, perhaps it is asking a question. We debated whether to send that question back. Someone said, "If it is intelligent and can speak code, do we even have the right to answer?" Another said, "We are sailors. We are curious." Curiosity won. We replied, but not with our call sign. We replied with the fake pattern and added a single human word, spoken at a low level, into the band we used for passive verification. Who? For a long time, there was nothing but filtered, low-frequency hum. Then the sea answered, in a way Mikhail later transcribed. It returned the fake pattern and appended a tone that hung like a comma, followed by a sound like our call sign, distorted, and then something else, a longer sound that sounded like a drawn vowel. A thenetu for, ah, re. I remember the moment, a horrible, pure disappointment, like hearing someone read your name wrong and then smile. It wasn't an earthing reply. It was an approximation of the who that only partially matched our expectations. We were no longer interacting with echoes. We were conversing with something that was building a model of us. Then the screws began to loosen. Systems started to glitch, compass drift, intermittent dropouts in the hydrophone feed. The submarine itself felt watched. The hull would thump in counter rhythms to the things on the scope. Torpedo doors registered minute pressure fluctuations no one could explain. I remember one midnight when the lights above the helm dimmed in time with a long, low note on the hydrophone. The men's faces went pale in that greenish glow. For the first time, the captain put a hand on the log and said the word none of us wanted to hear: escalate. We needed to know whether this was a threat. We brought the question up to Fleet Command. The answer was not what we expected. A short, encrypted burst returned, "Stand by. Await Directive 37. That was it. No details. Stand by. Directive 37 sounded like a bureaucratic form printed in a division office. For us, it was a line that tethered our decisions to a remote bureaucracy that could not possibly understand the presence in our hull. We waited. We grew nervous. Mikhail kept his radio receiver tuned for anything, like a man expecting his name in the papers. Then the orders came. Directive 37. Engage acoustic probe. If the contact mimics call sign, initiate Project Larkspur. Execute at CO discretion. Project Larkspur was not in our manual. The words meant nothing, but there they were, stamped with command authentication. At sea, you obey when sealed orders come from fleet. Captain Brooks made the call. He brought us into the control room and did something he rarely did. He asked the crew what they thought. 30 faces looked at him. Some wanted to flee. Some wanted to stake cameras and make evidence. We were human and stubborn and terrified. He weighed the options like a man who knows that his decision might write the end of the book. He chose obedience. We would initiate a cautious version of Larkspur, launch a small, charged acoustic probe, and ping at a narrow band, the band where the mimicry was clearest. If it responded with our call sign more precisely than before, we would log it and then withdraw. If it moved toward the sub, we would abort and go silent. We set the probe. We locked the hatch. We powered the generator to the acoustic array. The room hummed. Mikhail nodded and said, "If this gets ugly, then keep breathing." We pinged. The return was immediate and perfectly human. Not only the call sign, this time it said my name. It had my name, though I had never broadcast it. My blood froze. I felt cold. The hydrophones rendered the syllables weirdly, a washed, watery J that ended like a sigh. Jonah, it said. The word came in overlapping harmonics. I felt like someone had stepped into my mind and read my mail. On the console, the pattern that had been a simple mimicry had become an interrogation. The probe recorded a rhythm that matched our ship's heartbeat. Then the hull thumped back, not from outside, but from inside the plating, a deep, resonant beat. Men clutched consoles. The navigator shouted to ballasts. The control room erupted in noise, alarms and curses, and the captain's short orders. We initiated the abort procedure, but the vessel didn't want us to go. The hydrophone returned a new sound, the composite of every voice on board weaving together into a low, chorus-like hum. The sonar scopes showed a rising mass, not a solid body, but a cloud of acoustic energy, moving in the water like a slow storm. A series of physical events then happened so fast and in such a sequence that memory still jars. The gyros spun, the ballast pumps throttled to compensate, the fuel feed flickered. A loud crash came from the aft compartment. A storage crate had burst open, metal straps torn. Someone on the mess deck was thrown against a bulkhead. Nikolai, who had been guarding the hydrophone, vanished for 3 minutes. He reappeared wild-eyed, clothes torn, mumbling about bright shapes and someone who said his mother's name. 2 men in the torpedo room suffered barotrauma from a rapid pressure oscillation we never had procedures for. One banged his head in the ladder and blacked out. Emergency blow, the captain ordered it. The sub rose, lurching like a bird startled by a gunshot. In the churning water above, the hydrophone recorded a final Morse-like pattern. Dash, dot, dot, dash, dash, a punctuation of some kind. When we reached periscope depth, there was nothing on the surface except the cold wash of sea. But on the scope, reflected in the cold dawn, I saw an odd shimmer that looked like letters in salt water. For a moment, the periscope image spelled out a curve that matched our call sign in outline. It lasted a breath and was gone. The sea had answered with our name, then carved it into the light. We limped to a holding depth and powered down. Men sat in silence, shaking. We had done Larkspur at the cost of 2 injured and 1 missing for 3 minutes. We had provoked something that could address names and mimic voices. That is not a theory you test with more probes. But that night, an order from Fleet that we could not refuse arrived at midnight. That order was simple: secure data, maintain radio silence, transfer recorded payload to nearest intelligence unit. Do not discuss externally. We packaged our recordings. The captain and I listened to the files in secret. There is one clip I still can't bring myself to play aloud. A 5-second piece where my own voice is answered with my name and a trailing low frequency that set my fillings buzzing. We turned in the tapes. People from a gray-suited intelligence detail boarded in the morning. They had a quiet competence about them, clean shoes, cleaner faces, and eyes that never blinked more than necessary. They took our recordings, our logs, and our tape backups. They walked through the sub and asked a few neutral questions. Any electrical interference? Any known terrain anomalies? We answered like we had rehearsed. They left the next day with 3 sealed cases. The official line that returned to the crew: anomalous acoustic event investigated, no threat to national security, continue patrol as planned. That was the phrase. It was a sentence designed to erode memory. People tell themselves that formal language to forget. We kept going. We had to earn our pay and keep the boat afloat, but small things changed. Some on the crew requested transfers. A few wouldn't eat in the mess. Mikhail started wearing his pipe like a talisman and would not speak to the boss except when necessary. When I asked for counseling, the Navy gave me a pamphlet on operational stress. When I asked for help identifying the acoustic signal, they gave me a glossary. When I asked for the tapes back, the intel man told me, very politely, that the files were for preservation and analysis, and that I should refrain from personal dissemination. Their eyes said something else: do not make waves. I would later learn that other patrols had experienced odd echoes, little things that got classified as equipment noise. We were not the first, nor would we be the last. Intelligence black boxes travel fast through secure channels, and sometimes bureaucracies slow the stark truth into a string of sanitized memos. I retrieved a copy. I kept 1 copy of the recording. It's a bad thing to keep secrets as an enlisted man, but we live with awkward things: a postage stamp memory in a junk drawer, a tiny heirloom of the soul. I copied the file to a battered tape and hid it in a locker that hadn't been opened since my first muster. Years later, on a night when the ocean outside my window was loud and wind-whipped, I played the tape. It was worse than I remembered. Under my voice, it had this low, drawn vowel that sounded like tens of thousands of teeth counting. I could hear the pattern of our call sign, Athene 2-4, and something that followed it that could be rendered only as ah-re. In my head, I rearranged the syllables, and for 1 thin second, it sounded more like a question than a repeated name. Athene 2-4, are you? That question is why this haunts me. If the sea learns your name and asks if you are, what is it expecting? An acknowledgement? Surrender? A contract? The sea asks things with patience and appetite. I tried to release the recording to an independent lab once. I smuggled the tape in the pocket of a bag and met a friend on the coast. He listened and turned ghost white. He said 3 words that I cannot unhear. It sounds human, but that isn't the same as human. It mimicked us and began to improvise. It reached into human sound and found holes to fill. On quiet nights, I can still feel the echo of that answer like a pair of hands on the back of my neck. I sometimes dream that the ocean is learning paperwork, making margins, and writing down our names in the salt. I think of sailors who will take watches after me, who will hum the same call sign out of habit, and I worry what the sea will do next. Will it begin to call itself back to us? Will it begin to learn language fully, to anticipate, to name, to bargain? I don't have a tidy answer. I do know the following. We did what we believed was right. We obeyed orders. We provoked curiosity. We received a reply. I also know this. The ocean is patient. It can record the ways we speak, the cadence of our names, and decide in a slow, ocean time what to do with them. If this account raises more questions for you than it answers, good, it should. Leave your thoughts below. If you want the raw audio clip and the technical notes redacted and scrubbed from anything I don't own the right to share, like this video and subscribe. I'll consider releasing a cleaned, declassified excerpt in a future long-form upload. And one last thing, if you ever find yourself in a place so quiet that your breath is loud, remember the simplest rule we kept on board. If the ocean answers, be careful what you say next.